Have you ever looked at a finished project with a lovely pattern and beautiful stitches, only to realize that the colors are somewhat off? Well, today we're going to fix it. Today I have 10 tips for you on how to pick colors. This is not a video with heavy color theory, rules, and must-dos and don'ts. This is meant as a guideline, a little behind the scene of what is going on in my mind when I pick my colors. I will try to show a different kind of yarns, but for the most part I will be using these samples in a mercerized cotton yarn. And of course we can't talk about colors without actually having some crocheted projects with us. So for each tip and trick I'm going to show you some examples of how these colors actually work when you crochet with them. At the end of the video I have a little extra bonus tip for you, so stick around for that. And the most important thing today is to be inspired, not limited by colors. So I said no color theory, but we need to touch one subject, and this might actually be the only thing you need to learn today to get you started on your colors. Do you remember art class and something about base colors and complementary colors and color wheels? Well, this is a very, very short version of that. We have three basic colors: yellow, red, blue. Actually, if you mix those three, you get the brown one. So let's put that into the middle because, well, it belongs there. If you mix your colors, so if you mix your yellow and your red, you'll get the orange one. So let's bring that one in. If you bring your red and purple, red and blue, we get the purple color, and the yellow and the blue will give us the green color. So now you actually have your six main colors. Let's remove the brown one for a minute. This is your six main colors, and you can actually just stick with those if you're not interested in more than that. One thing to notice is what is called complementary colors. So it's colors that goes really well together. It's the ones that are opposite of each other in this wheel. So the yellow and the purple, orange, blue, red, and green. Those are complementary colors and they go really well together. Then you can, of course, think about it as starting to mix colors in like green and yellow, and you'll get new colors all the way around. But we're not going to go into more details on that. There's a lot of great videos out there about that. But we're going to bring in our white and our black. So this is for lighter colors or darker colors. I think the correct term is called values. So you have a color's value, but I like to just say shades today. I think that's just what I like. So let's say we start to add some, well, let's add some black to the red one, and then we get an even darker red. But if we added the white one to the red, well, we would get a pink color. So you can move your colors around like that and change the value of them to get just the shade that you want. I think the easiest way to think about all of this, you don't have to memorize anything about this. Just think about the rainbow and add white and black. So you have the rainbow, you just bend it so the yellow and the green are touching, and this is your base colors. Another thing I also like to do is to kind of divide my colors into groups. So I like have my very light pastel colors, maybe move over to my brighter, shinier, bold colors, and again maybe keep some of the darker ones together and some of the lighter ones. And then I kind of have like my, let's call it dusty shades, so that would be something like this. Another way of thinking about colors is to pick one color and then work within that group. So here I have different kind of purple shades, and you can of course also start adding in a little bit of blue, maybe if you want that, or go a little to the other side on that color wheel and move into the pink ones. But this will very often also give you a great variety of colors that goes really well together. Tip number one has to do with just picking one color. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that if that is what you're comfortable with. It's sometimes a matter of how you pick, what kind of pattern you pick and how that look. But if you want to work with colors but not really offer the challenge of doing it within the project, there are two different things you can look at it. The first one is to maybe add a little extra thread to your project. So for this one, this is also a pink square. I don't know how well this looks, but for this one I found this golden thread. It's not even yarn, it's something I picked up at a craft store, but I added it to go with the pink one, and then for every other round, well, the two first rounds are pink, and then I started adding the golden thread and when I was done with it, I just let it sit, did a round without it, and then changed over and added it again. So you can get all these little kind of, well, I don't know, some of it are for sewing, I think, and some of it is meant to be like this. I very often end up choosing silver or gold for this, but of course it comes in a variety of colors. So you can think about doing that. Of course, think about whether or not you need to change your hook size if you do add a little extra yarn to it. There's also a lot of, well, let me show you some things I did. Like I did a little Christmas tree last year where, well, it's pink as well, and I just added that little golden thread to it. This is another Christmas ornament I did. So again, I didn't have to do any color changes. I just took those 2 strands of yarn and crocheted with them. I actually also made a Santa hat. So this one is made in an acrylic yarn, and did the same thing for the red part, just added that little thread of yarn. You can of course also buy yarn that are one colored but has a little effect to it. Like, I don't know if you can see it for this one. I think this is just some acrylic yarn where it's a little white thread mixed in, and I have this, I think it's an acrylic yarn as well. Maybe some wool is mixed in here as well, where it's brown and then this golden color have been added. Another thing you can do if you're not up for all the color changes is to let your joinings or your borders be a different color than your actual project. Talking about joinings and borders, this takes us to tip number 2, and that is to remember to consider your entire project when you pick your colors. So I made this tote bag, as you can see. I use it to carry my yarn with me. And I did 18, of those heart squares. So I have 9 on each side. And first I had to decide on the color combination within the square. So I went with a lighter and a bolder color within the same hue. So blue, yellow, pink, and so on. So that was my first choice. Then I had to arrange them. So I had to figure out whether or not these colors would go together. I would like to have added an orange to it, but the colors, the yarn I was using didn't have orange colors that I liked. So I only used 5 different colors. Then I had to think about how to join them and whether or not I wanted the joinings to be visible and if they should have a specific color. I did a almost invisible join, as you can see, you can hardly see, but if you stretch the project a little bit, you can actually see the joining. And I went with white. And because of that, I also went with white for the borders on the side. And also I wanted a little bit of a border on top of the back to kind of even it out. And I went with white as well, just to keep it pretty simple. Then I had to choose colors for my straps as well. And I was really unsure about that. But for the one side of the bag, I went with the 3 top colors, so blue, green, and yellow for this one. And these colors also go great together, as we saw on the color wheel. And then on the other side, I had yellow, pink, and purple on top of the bag. So I went with those 3 colors for this strap. And I just took the 3 strands of yarn, put them together, used a bigger hook size. And I think it turned out great, but this is really a great example of how you have to think about all the elements of your project before you choose your colors. I also have a few other examples. So this is made in a plain cotton, and I went with pink, white, and green for this little square. And I had to think about how I wanted to join them. And I ended up wanting to just use the join as you go method. So it's this one right here where you just, for your last round, you connect your clusters. And I went with the white one because the white one is kind of a background color for the square, but here it becomes more of both the background and a frame for this project. I can show you one more example. So I did some of these great flower squares. I think they look just lovely. And again, I had to think about how I wanted to join them and also the border. So I ended up going with a strong pink, which is the same as in the center, for the outside border. And then for the joining itself, I went with the same cream color as the one in the square. So this joining is doing a lot to the project. So I could have gone with the pink one instead, and it would have been less obvious, but I thought it would be really cool to use this one. If you want to move to two colors, one of the best suggestions I have is to use contrast colors or use a neutral or white as a background color for your projects. I have some examples here. You might have seen some of these squares before if you've seen some of my other videos, but that is what I have in my two colored versions. So all of these are just made with a neutral color together with the one color I have picked. I think that works really well. And some patterns actually work extremely well with only two colors. I am talking a lot about that in one of my square videos that I will link to in the description. Well, this one is actually also one with a white, kind of creating a background effect. I think that looks really cool. But you can, of course, also do other things with just two colors. You can use some colors that are, very close to each other and will create still kind of a contrast effect. I also have all these little ones. So I use a brighter and a darker color within the same scheme. It's very clear on this one particularly. This one there's a lot of contrast in this one, and I think that makes a really great effect as well. There's of course also other ways of using you can of course go with the black and white version. That is always popular. So you could argue whether or not this has to do with colors, but that is also very often a safe choice if you don't really know how to mix these colors. I have some more examples here. So yellow and blue goes really well together. Again, kept within the same shade, so I think that works great as well. Another example is these two, because I think they work really well together. And I was thinking about why is that? Because yellow and blue and orange and purple are not supposed to go together. But I think, well, if you look at just one of them at a time, it's okay. They look kind of great. But if you put them next to each other, you actually have the complementary colors together. So you have the orange and the blue, and you have the purple and the yellow one. I think that is kind of why this works so well. Back to the neutrals or the background colors. So I also have these little ones. Again, it's about whether or not you're going to put them together as a whole project, or you just have them. Like I made one where I didn't use the neutrals but have the pink and the in light and dark, and also the ones where I used the neutrals. So if I were to make a project with all these, I would put these together, but this one does really not fit that. When you're making flowers, two colors is also a great option. So I have these little ones, pink and yellow, that I made. Other yarn types where it works very well as well. So I have this acrylic yarn, used two different purples. I also have a woolen one where I used green and pink. As you might know by now, I am a big fan of pastel colors. Can't help it. And this one is also the last example where I just took this strong minty color and added the white to it. Tip number 4 is about moving up to multicolors. And in the beginning, you got a little bit of a sense of how colors work together. So the next thing would be, how do you get inspired to use all these wonderful colors? So what I do is I sometimes look through books, magazines. Not that I'm doing the exact same pattern as in those, but they have some really great examples of good color choices. It could also be going on Pinterest or just looking around and maybe you see a lovely bedsheet or a tablecloth or any kind of textiles that has a great pattern where the colors are really working great together. You can also look into other crafts like quilting or coloring books, or people who do beads or things like that. They also have some wonderful color combinations sometimes. You can just think about a dress, think about just pretty much anything in your surroundings, which could also be like feelings or some kind of mood you're in, like with the bag I showed you before, and that also goes with some of these over here. I was kind of going for like a carnival kind of feeling, and I think that popped out really well. I think for this one, I was thinking more about like the sun, like a sunrise thing, and then the green in the background. And you can do that with pretty much anything. Another great way to be inspired is to maybe just lean into that it might be given. So if you're making a sun, it might just be given that you make it in yellow, or like I have these daisy squares. So if you want to have a daisy, you kind of have to do the yellow and white. But again, of course, you don't have to. So be inspired, not limited. I have a few others here where I changed up the yellow and the green a little bit. You can, of course, do that. You could also do a blue background for this one instead, but we're still within what might just be given. And I also like with the flowers, you might have some certain colors you want to use, something that would actually be out in the nature. But again, I mean, maybe this would be a great way of making a sun, but that doesn't mean you can't change up the colors and bring in something maybe a little more fun. Again, be inspired, not limited. You can also think about leaves, or maybe you're crocheting something with a watermelon. Well, then you're going to use red and green and black because that is how a watermelon looks. You can also think about where the project is going to live. So if you have like I have a pretty, let's say basic living room with not that many colors. So I don't think I would make something with strong colors for that room. But as you saw before, I have this yarn back that is really kind of a carnival feeling, and I wanted a lot of color on that one. And since it is holding a creative project, I don't mind it like that. And the last thing is of course to think about if you're making something for someone else. So do they have a favorite color, or are they using the project for something special? That will also, kind of, then the colors will be given, and that's totally fine to just lean into that. So for number 7, we're still talking about inspiration, and I think this is actually the best one. So I often like to think about seasons and celebrations. So this is my color palette for fall, autumn. I think these more dusty colors mixed with burnt orange and burnt yellow, mustard yellow, green, blues, darker reds. I think they are great for that time of year. Again, you can also think about celebrations. So maybe you want to do like a little pumpkin for a harvest festival or something like that. And this is one of those that can be given. So just go with it, orange and green, or change up the colors if you want to play around with it. You can, of course, also think about Halloween, or maybe you have some local special holidays you want to think about. I don't really have a winter palette. I just tend to stick with those dusty colors in darker shades. But of course, I like to celebrate Christmas and I like to do Christmas projects. So I, of course, also have yarn that I use for that. Again, red is a classic. White, of course, for a snowflake. Again, you don't have to do that. For this one, I just used a red, orange, metallic yarn to make the snowflakes, and I think that looks very great as well. I think this might actually represent the colors that I use the most in December and around Christmas time. My personal spring palette is very much about pastels. In general, I use them a lot. I really love it. I think it makes everything look so romantic, and just it gives me a nice feeling. And again, you can mix and match them. Maybe you can use, maybe you're celebrating Easter and want to make something for that. You could go with pastels, or you can go with traditional Easter colors like green and yellow and orange and red and those ones. You might also celebrate Valentine's Day and want to make something for that, like little pink stars or purple stars. That might also be good. My personal summer palette has a lot of colors in it. It's bold, it's bright, it's fun, because for me, that's kind of what summer is all about. And again, you can think about flowers, ocean, sunrise, whatever you like. Maybe you're going to celebrate a national holiday, like so. This one is kind of cool because I mixed in that little strain of gold just to make that fun. You can also play around with things like that. If you think that was quite a lot and you might be a little more confused than you actually were in the beginning, or overwhelmed, that's totally fine. I get that. Let's talk about a pretty safe choice when it comes to working with different colors, but working with one skein of yarn. And that is variegated colors. So this is yarn you can buy in different kind of, well, of course, in different kind of materials, but also done in different ways. So this is an ombre color. So we move within the same shade, but we move between light and dark. I think this is really nice. You can see what it looks like when it's crocheted. This actually also have a, I think, silver thread. to it. So that gives a really nice effect to a project. Of course, you have to choose the right pattern for a project like this. I think this one is, well, it's not, the sample didn't work out very well. I think I'm using the wrong hook size, but so this yarn that works over green, blue, and purple. And I was trying to do the crisscross or the magic granny square pattern, but it did not turn out very well. So it doesn't work every time, but it will very often do. So I also did two different ones over here. So this is the pop petal pattern, and this is the willow square done in a variegated yarn, so with these natural color changes all the way through. Again, great combination, blue, yellow, and green, works extremely well. And then I had to test the shell pattern because somebody suggested to me that I should do it in a variegated yarn. So I found this variegated yarn. It's just some cheap stuff I had lying around in my stash. I don't even really know where I got it from. But this works extremely well in a variegated yarn, as you can see. I think it's just turned out great. And again, you can also turn it over. Looks great as well. One of the really good things about variegated yarns is that you can also draw a lot of inspiration from them. So this one uses yellow, orange, pink, purple into some bluish ones, maybe even a little bit of gray. So that could be a great guideline for you when you choose your colors, because as you can see here, within the same shade or color value, it works perfectly. The next thing I think about when I choose my colors is what is the pattern, what stitches am I going to use, and sometimes also a little bit about my tension, because patterns with more full stitches, like the spike stitches or the front post stitches, I don't think they quite call for a lot of color changes as much as other patterns does. I think the patterns actually becomes very clear and very beautiful by just using two colors. Another important thing is to, especially if you're making a project that is used on both sides, so like a blanket, you need to flip over your projects, of course, and see how the colors look on the back side. So this one is actually very different. So we have the spike stitches, 2 rounds of blue here, but if you turn it over, you don't have the spike stitches because they're not visible on the back side, but it looks quite different on the back side. So if you want a blanket where it doesn't matter what side you're on, this is definitely not a good pattern and a good color combination. But if you like this one, well, you can of course go with that as well. So the crisscross also have a different back sides because we are using the front posts. So that is really something to consider as well. Some patterns also just call for one color. So like I have all these little mini stars that I made. And this is a pattern, I think this one is only 2 or 3 rounds. And it doesn't really make sense to start doing a lot of color changes for these. But again, if you're grouping them together afterwards, if you wanted to hang them or something like that, then you of course need to think about your color choices. This is also a great example of how the colors can seem a little different. So this is the shell square, and I have a blue one here, and I made a different square, and looking at it like this, they might look very similar, but let's bring them up. As you can see, there is a difference. So this one over here on the right, I did puff stitches instead of shells, and I did little clusters of 3 double crochets instead of V-stitches. And as you can see, there is something distinct different about them. The white is more clear in this one, which of course makes sense because the clusters of 3 double crochets of course uses more yarn than the V-stitches. But again, if you're changing up a pattern a little bit into other stitches, this is kind of important to know as well. I know I've shown you a lot of squares today because that is what I do. I love squares, so most of the time I am doing squares. But when it comes to color, you of course also have to consider whether you are crocheting in the round, so making squares, or you're doing it in rows. As again, you can see it's this on almost the same pattern. This shell pattern in rows is a little bit different than the other one because my shells have 2 more double crochets because that just works better in rows. But as you can see, I actually did I did a single crochet round on top of my chain at the beginning, and I did a single crochet round at the top and on one of the sides. And that gave the project a little more white, but still the white is not as distinct as it is on the square. And there's a very natural explanation for that, and that is the corners. is we don't have corners as such on the row. We're just, of course, changing colors, moving up, but we don't have the corners. And in a square, the corners will kind of make a big difference on how much the colors are popping out. So for rows, I will just suggest make a little sample and see how it works, because as you can see, the white is clearly less apparent in the row than it is in the round. Before we continue with the next tip, I have a quick question for you. I would like to know if you have any particular subjects that you would like me to talk about in some of my future videos. I do have a couple of ideas myself, but I would really like to know if you have something particular in mind, and just leave it in the comments if you have a suggestion, and I will look and see how that fit in to my plans. So we're almost at the end, but I just have a few more things I want to highlight before we end this. And one of them is about the brand and the from the yarn company that you're buying from. It's very easy to be limited by a certain color range that they have, but again, be inspired by it. Do not feel obligated to use those colors. And sometimes you can just switch over to a different yarn brand if the one that you're using does not have the colors that you like. Some brands can also be mixed. It doesn't always work, but for some of them, it actually does work. I want to give you a little story about my experience with that, because, well, not mixing yarns, but this is my favorite yarn, and it's a mercerized cotton yarn. And normally you have the thinner yarns, so one that called for a 2.5 millimeter, 3 millimeter hook. But this one uses a 4 millimeter hook, so I really like this because that is the right size for me. But so I can't really find a different brand than the one I'm using that has this type of yarn. But what I'm experiencing right now is that a lot of these colors are being discontinued, which makes me so sad. So actually I think this one and, well, this one, and I think, no, it's this orange one and the mustard yellow, which I do not get. I think there's a few more. I think the pink one and the light orange one as well. And oh yeah, the turquoise one. I think there's one of the purple ones as well. I think this one maybe. So all of these colors out here have been discontinued, and it makes me so sad because I think these are great colors. I really love this mustard yellow and this kind of dark purple, and the turquoise one is, I think, great. Can't really use that. I think my favorite one is this pink, and that was discontinued as well. And I just had a quick look at their homepage yesterday, and I realized that one of my absolute favorite colors, so it's this minty green, is also being discontinued. So I have tried to buy everything I can from these colors, but of course I can't do it now. I can't do larger projects with these colors because, well, I don't know if I can get them again. And since I started using this one, I think these two colors, it's like, I can't remember, almond and coffee kind of colors, have been added to the range of colors, but there's been a lot more that has been discontinued, and that makes me really, really sad. Another thing you have to think about when buying colors, well, buying yarn in general, is to look at whether or not they belong to the same dye lot. Because if they're not dyed in the same lot, they can have some color differences. It's for some brands it's more than others. This is crazy, but I was doing something in a white plain cotton yarn, and well, when I was almost done with the project, I realized that the white yarn were not dyed in the same lot. So there's actually quite a big color difference in that project, which makes no sense because it's white. But I have to make a new project and make sure I choose the same colors for that, the same dye lot for that one. You can of course go into a shop, buy your colors. You will often have a greater feeling for what the colors are like. Just remember that a lot of stores that have yarn keep it pretty dark, like no big windows, because sunlight and colors or yarn does not work very well together. So sometimes you might have to bring the yarn to a window to really get the sunlight and daylight in general to see what the colors are like. of course also buy them online. A lot of yarn companies have like options where you can compare colors, and they also have great color suggestions, how well their colors go together. And you can of course also take advantage of that. My last tip before the little bonus tip I have for you is very straightforward and might sound very simple, but it is very important. If what you have works, don't change it. Don't feel forced to use a whole lot of colors if that's not for you. Or if you, like me, have a favorite color palette. So I love these purple shades mixed in with a little blue and a little pink. I'm kind of sticking to that for a lot of projects because it works for me. And if you have one or two colors that works extremely well for you, then stay with them. And it could be your favorite color. If that works for you, don't feel forced to change anything. And also remember, when you are working with colors, you do have a lot of yarn ends to weave in, and you have to decide whether or not you're up for that challenge. Sometimes I kind of regret when I use a lot of colors because there's so many yarn ends to weave in. I've come to terms with yarn ends, and I'm kind of enjoying it now, or just accepting that it's part of colorful projects. But if you're not up for the challenge, you should not force yourself into all these color changes. My little bonus tip for you is very straightforward. It's right here, and it's my personal color library. So as you can see, I had all these little samples turned over as we did the video, but as you can see, if you turn them over, I have these little markings on them, and they have the color numbers on there as well. This is how I keep track of the colors for this particular yarn. I made all these little samples some time ago, and of course I didn't have all the colors at first, but whenever I got a new color, I made one of these samples to fit. And I also have I cut out the little important information from the yarn, so I know this color, this type of yarn, and what to do with it. And I keep that together with all these little swatches. You can also wrap your yarn around a little clothespin or something like that and save it. And again, don't go out and buy a lot of colors just because you want something like this. Whenever you have a yarn and a color, save a little bit of it. I made swatches. You don't have to do that. You can just simply do something like this and keep a little bit of it and wrap it around something. Maybe keep the information from the yarn together with it and just save it, because if you want to buy something from that yarn brand again later on, looking at maybe you had 2, 3, 4 colors previously, and if you have those samples, it can give you a really good idea about what their color range is all about. So whenever I buy some yarn, I keep a little sample, and I have a little box that I store it in, and I can kind of go back and check that when I want to buy some of that yarn again. That was all for today. Thank you for watching this video. I know it turned out a little long, but I had so much information that I wanted to give you, and I hope some of it came across not being too confusing. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, please leave them in a comment and I will get back to you. And I'll see you in the next video.